And I'd like to begin with a question or something that you said in your speech, Amparo. You said that you wanted to convince people in Chile, in Peru, in Guatemala, in wherever, that Canadian companies in the mining sector respect the same standards in their work abroad as they do in Canada. Is that in fact the case?
Yes, absolutely. I have heard in different spaces people saying you Canadian companies have some level of standards and things that you do differently in Canada when you are here in Latin America. I think that is not the reality. Maybe there can be some players or small players that don't follow the same standards, but I would say that today it's impossible to do mining if you don't do it with the highest standards as possible. You need to start working. I was telling about this big project that we built in Chile. We start engaging with indigenous group years before we start working in the project. We were able to establish 22 agreements with indigenous group. We built this very big project that was very difficult also because it was during COVID, and we didn't have one single day of a stoppage due to any social dispute. So I think following the standards is the correct thing to do, but it's also the correct business approach. Otherwise, it's not possible to do business.
Exactly. Well, you said something interesting in your remarks, right? That there's a difference between a big Canadian mining company on the one hand and the juniors that are also active, and they don't always behave in the same way, right? Dominic, any thoughts on this question?
Yeah, I think when I look across sort of the Kinross operations, we have can you hear me? Yes. Yeah. We have operations in South America, the US, Africa, and I think we're sort of living in a world of mining now which is intensely global, and not only that, but an environment of learning. And so, you know, I would say that nowadays, you know, you can have one of our operations in the US learning a best practice from our mine in Mauritania, which is learning a best practice from our mine in Chile. So, you know, that sort of sharing of knowledge and practices across the sector is alive and essential. I think just drives continual improvement across the sector. And then just going to the point you mentioned about the junior mining sector, you know, the way the mining sector works is you have a lot of junior companies which do exploration, and generally speaking, big companies come along, buy the projects and build the mines. And so I think, obviously, in any business sector, there's a range of practices, but what we all want to drive towards is responsible practice, irrespective of which part of the value chain of the mining business you're in. And I think in today's world, the responsibility is greater than ever on even a small exploration company just to do the simple, basic things right when they're working on the ground. And fundamentally, the most important thing they can do is build good relationships with all of their local stakeholders so that there's an element of trust and building trust, so that as that project evolves and potentially a Teck or a Kinross comes along and acquires the project, they're acquiring a project where there's support and value added to that project, not just a mineral resource.
I mean, I get the sense you're both very committed to what it is that you're doing, which is admirable. And I asked you this question when we prepared for this. I mean, do you have the sense you have the full support of your headquarters? I mean, are you a nice to have or are you a need to have?
No, I believe that there is a comprehensive and consistent approach in the company coming from the board, the senior management, that sustainability and responsible mining are core to the strategy of the company. It's impossible to do mining if you don't do it in a sustainable way. I don't think that these topics are in the peripheric area of the company. I think they are in the core of the business. In our case, we have been discussing, as all the companies, reviewing your strategy and rethinking things. And we believe that especially the social and indigenous commitment is critical. It's a competency that it's to win, and we really need to, and we put a lot of effort there. So basically, it's not a difficult discussion internally. It's the correct approach.
It's the right approach. Okay. Dominic, do you feel the same way?
Yeah, 100%. Our CEO, he talks often about responsible mining being at the heart of our culture and the DNA of the company, and that's really grounded in our values as a company. So Kinross, like many companies, we have corporate values. In Kinross, we have 4 values: putting people first, outstanding corporate citizenship, rigorous financial discipline, and high performance culture. And so when you think about those 4 things and you're thinking about making a business decision for a mine, there's an inherent tension there. You want to be efficient financially, you want to perform well, but you've got to put people first. You've got to think about the communities and responsibility with the communities. And so having those values, I've seen it in the 16 years I've been in Kinross, the constructive tension that those create, but they provide a bedrock from which decisions are made, and that's at the heart of the company.
Amparo, what does mining look like in 20 years' time? What does Canadian mining in the Americas specifically look like, ideally? Where would you like us to be? And I say us collectively as Canadians, right? Or as stakeholders in Canadian companies.
Well, Chile is a mining country, so I think mining is embedded in our society. I think that mining has an incredible power of transforming not only the products that we produce that have a great impact in the society and in the modern world, but people that work in mining are transformed. I think the impact in the communities, the capacity of building relations and thinking about a common future is transforming. We do have a very fantastic program, I would say, with UN Women, focusing indigenous women. And I've seen the impact and how more than 3,500 indigenous women in Chile have been transformed by this program. So when I think about the future, I think, first of all, today we have the opportunity of connecting with the society because the products that we do are critical for the future. And I think there is a possibility to engage with young people, with people that were very reluctant to mining in the past. So I see that as a very good opportunity. And I also think that there is a kind of opportunity where mining, governments and communities can work together so that transformation can be very consistent and sustainable.
Dominic, what does the future look like? Will you be mining on Mars in your lifetime?
Not in our lifetime, I don't think. Maybe at the bottom of the sea. I would just add sort of two points to the points to what Amparo said. I think one is on carbon. Yeah. I think in 20 years' time, you'll have a mining sector which is just way more efficient now in terms of emissions reduction for what we call Scope 1 emissions, which are the ones generated by your mobile fleets. But then also working through our providers to reduce emissions we use from the grid. So I think sort of the efforts of the mining sector to reduce impact on climate will be radically more advanced in 20 years' time. I think that's key. And I think the other thing where hopefully we'll see more advance is how benefits are distributed. One of the challenges in the mining sector in many countries is you pay your taxes to the central government. But then there's not always an efficient distribution of how some of those taxes come back to the local community. And that creates all kinds of tensions, which mining companies usually end up then, they get caught up in those tensions.
Very interesting. One final question. What's the value added of the Canadian brand in mining in the Americas?
I firmly believe that the Canadian brand is extremely important and powerful and recognized in most of the countries in Latin America. I know that there are places where there have been no very good experiences with some players, but I think that because of the work that we do, we could change that perception in those countries. But I think a Canadian brand is associated with respect, dialogue, and a fair engagement. So I think it's
A fair
super
engagement. That's
powerful.
well put. You always have the formula for the phrase that stays with you. A fair engagement. That's great. Dominic, closing thoughts on the Canadian brand or anything else you'd like to share with us? This is your chance.
No, I would fully agree. I've spent most of my career in South America, and I've always found that the Canadian brand is received with respect, and that comes from the way that the bulk of Canadian businesses behave when they're overseas. And you also see it in people working for Canadian companies overseas. I've heard it so many times. I like working this company because they follow the law. I mean, it's simple, right? You work for a company, you get paid your benefits, you get responsible and respectful treatment. So I think Canada has a lot of value to add now and in the future in the Americas, and we hope to be part of that.
It's a very nice note on which to end this conversation. Thank you very much to both of you. Again, congratulations.
Thank you very much.